Marie Highland, who unfortunately for us, but not for Marie, did in holidays in Cyprus, which conflicted with our dates. And Joyce Henderson, who was caught up in the cancellation of the boats from Spain. So Joyce was able to reschedule her trip, but it was today, she was returning today. So apologies from those two. Now, we also received a large number of apologies from our members who couldn't attend. Now, the first thing that I'll actually ask, the minutes for the 1917 or AGM, or last year's AGM, now they were on the board outside, or they're on the table outside, and they were circulated to everybody with their correspondence. So if you actually, unless you have any changes or amendments to the minutes, I'll leave it with you to make up your mind within 30 seconds. So unless you have any amendments to the minutes, can I have a proposer and seconder for adoption of the minutes? And seconder?
Pass.
Thank you. Now the next item on the agenda is my report. Now outside, for example, we had a copy of the report with an extremely articulate chairman's report. And I've now, but instead of that, give a presentation which is somewhat similar format to the report, but not as articulate. Okay. No, just yeah. Yeah. Yep. Thanks. Okay, well, I'll start now with the highlights for 2000. No, I mean, as I say, the report outside is in a very articulate presentation of what we're actually going to do, but I'm going to highlight some aspects of this in a different format. Now, our finances, for example, which Macrina will cover, we're maintaining a break-even situation. Just lost a small loss last year of €2,400, which is absorbed by our reserves. But the problem with our finances is they're reducing every year. Now, over the past 10 years, the finance that we actually had reduced by 150,000 over 10 years. Now, over the last 4 to 5 years, we give you an indication. For example, as the Department of Environment was a grant we had for a number of years, which disappeared last year. So we're suffering the loss of almost 25,000 there. PFI, which Susan was talking about, the last grant we got from PFI had reduced 25,000, but we had plans for that 25,000. It disappeared 3-4 years ago. HSE funding reduced a small amount by 3,000. Our fundraising, now even in last year, our fundraising had literally halved. Now, and you ask why? Why is our fundraising so ineffective? It's because of the competition out there in the market. For example, you may remember a number of people here, I know that Bridget, myself, a number of people were, did collection last Christmas for the winter heating grant. It's a collection which is distributed among a number of charities. Now, we did the collection at the Mansion House, we were welcomed by the Lord Mayor, etc., etc. But we had two things. One aspect was in Dawson Street, opposite the Mansion House, so I took up a stance on the other side of the road. So we were getting people passing on Dawson Street. Now, the interesting thing about this was, lower down Dawson Street, there was another charity collecting. Up at the top of Dawson Street, the Stephen's Green, there was another charity collecting. So the problem that I saw was anybody coming past us were already passing charities. That's why our collections are reducing, our fundraising is reducing, very, very difficult. And we have a large bequest which is now eked away over the last number of years. And so literally we've lost 95,000 over the last 3 to 4 years, which is a substantial amount of money for a small charity like ourselves. Now, get on to regulation. Now, this is a major problem for us because we've got, the problem arises because of the number of policies and procedures we've got to produce. So, for Anne and the staff in the office, and we at the board spend a lot of our time producing policy and procedures to satisfy the HSE and Charities Regulator, the Companies Office, and GDPR. I'll just have a look at the 4 of these separately in a moment. And the other highlight of last year was the Polio Register, which had already been covered, very, very successful, and we hope, for example, to continue the success of that in the near future. But now the other challenges which we actually want to cover, board governance, for example. Now it's the in-buzz phrase at the moment, because of PMI and because of all the problems with Delaney, etc., etc. He made a mistake because, and then of course investigation of the board, etc. No corporate governance, etc. So they're a very large organisation. No corporate governance. They're literally going down the tubes because other people external are getting involved in the organisation itself. Corporate governance means that we've got to have a number of policies and procedures in operation, because if the HSE or if the charities regulator examines us, we've got to show that we've either got policies and procedures in place or we're preparing to put them in place. So we as a small organisation have got to do what large organisations are doing. All the large organisations can do this, they've got the staff to do it. We're a small organisation, we don't, and we've got to try and do it ourselves. Now this with the board governance, for example, we've got a subcommittee called Governance and Compliance. And that's the one that handles, for example, the development of these policies and procedures. And there are 5 or 6 members of the board and Fran on this committee. So as you can see, a lot of work has been done. Now financial management, again, it's another problem because Macrina, as our treasurer, she's the chairman of the Finance and Audit Committee. And she's got to put procedures in place for our financial side. For example, procedures relating to purchasing, credit cards, etc. And she's got to have these in, and a number of these have already been completed by ourselves. Now, member services, for example, member services, which is very important. We've got another committee, for example, which is chaired by Roshi, and we've obviously got to ensure that everything we do with the members is up to ethical and business standards. So again, Roisin and her committee again have produced a number of procedures and policies in this end. Now staffing of volunteers, recently for example we've produced a staffing handbook, and the staffing handbook is normally voluminous item, and so it recently has come into play. The staffing handbook contains everything relating to staff, pay and conditions of employment, equality legislation, all the procedures that staff have to be aware of. They've got to have that, and this has been approved by the staff themselves. And again, you know yourself with volunteers, the conditions relating to volunteers. Volunteers, for example, join us, and we need for obviously the first thing is to get guard the vetting, etc. So there are obviously terms and conditions relating to volunteers, and all this takes an enormous amount of work. And then data protection, GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations, which is the last one to come down the line. It's actually hit us. Now, you know what data protection is. It means that your data has got to be secure. We've got to, and it cannot be available just as anybody wants it. For example, the recent one with data protection, nobody really knows, or nobody is controlling the data protection at the moment. You may have been aware, for example, of the GPO and the bins the GPO had. And they were removed under data protection. The problem was the GPO removed the bins because people were dropping paper into the bins. So they were signing envelopes or forms or whatever, and there were people's names in it and addresses on it, and then they said, oh, this is breach of data regulations. We've got to, so the people were advised to remove it. So they were advised to remove it because the GPO removed the bins. Even the charities regulator, I think last week, said this was going too far, and the GPO replaced the bins. You see, so nobody really has got a total handle on what's actually involved. But we have, for example, got to get regulations ourselves relating to your data, which is extremely important to you. It can be very sensitive, it can be confidential. We don't want it divulged to anybody who shouldn't actually have it. And also our communications with you. You've got to be aware, for example, that if you don't want our communications, we've got to invite you, you've got to tell us you don't want them, etc. So it's a major area of concern for ourselves, small organisation. Now, just to actually fill you in on one thing, another challenge which I actually haven't put up there, but we received a letter recently from one of our members who resigned from PSI. And he said, now, just like he said, the basis of his resignation is that polio survivors should be able to organise themselves without all of this. All of this meaning CEO, staff, we don't need an office, we should put one of the purpose of AGMs, all the rest, etc. And the second key element of his letter was, we should be able to lobby TDs and government as a group ourselves. Now, I responded to him on the basis that, well, first of all, I totally regret the fact that he resigned, tell him that if he needs any support, for example, as a polio survivor, all he has to do is contact us. He doesn't need to be a member of the association. But I also told him that 3/4 of the funding we receive comes from the government, from the state, and the rest is fundraising. And all this requires staffing, admin, corporate governance, etc. If the government gives you money, there's conditions attached to it, and they don't give you that money just without supporting those conditions. And this option is to go without funding. For example, if we go without funding and we forgo the state aids, then his option is to, well, why don't we fund or collect funding ourselves? To do that, you've got to register. So if you register, you've got to register the charities regulator. And the charities regulator will lay down all the same conditions that the corporate governance is laid down. You see, so there's no way, for example, you can actually survive yourself. Or as a small group lobbying, for example, Susan has given you the aspect, what's required in lobbying. Now, what we had actually had was, so that's how I responded to our member. Now, he resigned, etc., but he asked us if we could raise this at the AGM. So I'm putting it forward to yourselves if you have any questions on it. And I have no doubt that a number of aspects that he raised will be of interest to yourselves. So, now the next aspect that I want to cover very rapidly is the strategic plan. Now, as you know, the strategic plan has been covering the survivor over the year, and we've given very little progress on it. The strategic plan is essential. It's laid down on our corporate governance, it's laid down by the charity regulator, etc. You've got to have a strategic plan. We have a strategic plan. The strategic plan is the framework for anything that we do, everything that we do. We lay out plans, all the actions, etc. Now, in our strategic plan, we can actually map progress. So we've got 4 priorities on the strategic plan. And the priority number 1 is provide a range of services and supports to assist polio survivors. Maintain their independence and reduce social exclusion. But this is basically done because we want to enhance the quality of people's lives. Now, social support training is provided to 8 conveners and assistant conveners last year. 16 new members were referred to social support, to reduce social inclusion and enhance their lives, and telephone support. 3 new leaders were trained and appointed, although this is an area that we've got problems with. Now, service and support, to give you some indication of the service and supports that people have received. There are 242 members contacted us for support, 63 inquiries from others, 73 members helped with aids and appliances and stair lifts, and as you know, most of us need an appliance. It's absolutely essential for our mobility. 102 members provided with therapies, respite breaks, hardship support, and 257 members provided with a heating grant, which again is at the end of the year. And you know, people who suffer from polio, they suffer from tremendous cold weather can be very difficult for them. So these are the sort of inquiries and queries we get regularly, and we got last year. Now, our priority number 2 is to inform, educate and assist polio survivors in assessing service supports, care and benefits. Now, Emma and Nia covered literally this, the polio register. Won't go over it again, but very, very successful. And I think even Bridget was saying that in the recent week or two she gave a local interview to Dublin North Side or so. And we supported it by regional promotional campaigns, which were very effective. And over 28,000 leaflets were distributed to every doctor's practice, health clinic, etc. Now, this is very interesting because one of our directors was, Tony O'Connor, for example, is a member of the Clontarf Hospital, a trustee and a director of Clontarf Hospital. And when they're recently having an operation, he saw our booklet in the hospital reception area, which was great in Clontarf. I myself, for example, saw a leaflet in my GP's waiting room about polio. Now, I actually asked my GP, how many polio survivors do you treat? Oh, she said 1. I said, who's that? She said, yourself. So, but at least she'd got the information up there, etc. Now, our priority number 3, to advocate for improved services, supports and medical care, etc. Now, we had highlighted the 25,000, the reduced grant from PFI for this purpose. Now, PFI have said there are rehab are not giving us any money, so we haven't got the advocate for us. And Susan and her group are obviously trying to remedy that situation. Now, and of course, for improved services, an advocate, you may remember, for example, during the year, the cost, we highlight the cost and long delays for customised shoes, etc. And I think one of our new directors, Robert Atcorn, was on that situation itself, on that protest itself. Now, unfortunately, there's no money for the advocacy officer, which is a major objective of ours. Now, develop the organisation, board and staffing to implement this plan. Fine, we recruited 50 new members last year, 24 new active members who became involved with us, 3 external volunteers were recruited, and 4 new people recruited to the board over the past year. Now, the whole thing, which always fascinates me, we're a voluntary organisation, and a voluntary organisation, the majority of people are all volunteers. They do it because they want to do it, and because they've got something to give back. So the 4 new recruited directors were Marie Hyland was appointed to the board to fill a vacancy. Now, some of you may remember Marie. She came to our conferences regularly with Tom Cooney, and Tom had a fall last year, so Tom is now paraplegic, or quadriplegic, so he's very, very seriously ill. But so he wasn't able to come to, obviously, the conference this year, or to many of our social groups. And we've got 3 new board-nominated directors, Elaine Toomey, Fintan Foy, and Miriam Kavanagh, who are right here, who avoided or who abandoned me at the desk up here, but are sitting at the table here. And I must say they're extremely experienced people who are giving them their skills, their knowledge and their experience to ourselves free of charge. And 2 members of our members were elected to the board, and these 2 members are Robert Atcorn and Frank Mitchell. So I'm glad that, first of all, I'd like to welcome the new directors, and I welcome our 2 new members to the board, and I have no doubt whatsoever they'll be able to contribute. Now, that's it. That's my thing. So I just like to, for example, if you want to, or if the company outside, for example, the Bowman Research Project, I've just heard, for example, they're very happy with the number of people who actually signed up, but they want more. Okay, thank you. Oh yes, any questions? No questions. I knew I've developed, or I've galloped through the report, so it'd be a lot easier if you get the report that, for example, the printed copy of the report, which is greatly more articulate than my presentation. And but if there are no questions, I would ask for a proposer and seconder for adoption of the report.
John. So your name, please. Second.
And now we've got the Secretary's report. Now, as I said, the Secretary is still in Spain, so Fran is going to step into the Secretary.
Thanks, Pat. There's no doubt in my mind I'd rather be in Spain and have Joyce standing here. The Company Secretary's report is a little bit of a dry document, but I am required to read through it. There is, as Pat said about the other reports, there is copies of it outside, but I will try and lighten it up as best I can. As Company Secretary, I can report and confirm that the company and its officers have made all the returns required under statute and statutory instrument to the regulatory authorities. I can also confirm and report that the company officers and directors have, to the best of their collective knowledge and advised by legal representation, complied with all necessary provisions under the relevant statutes. The Board of Directors held 10 meetings during the year, so just in case you think that they're just idling away there, they're actually working very, very hard. And in addition to those 10 board meetings, every director is a member of at least one, and in some cases 2 board subcommittees, and Pat outlined those subcommittees earlier. I won't go back through them now. Each of those committees would have met an average of 3 to 4 times a year, and in some cases even 5 or 6 times last year. And a lot of the real work of the board is actually done by the board subcommittees, who can devote more time to the nitty-gritty, or the knit-and-grit, if that's a proper term, of an issue before it then goes to the board for approval. Some of you may be aware of the whole governance issue, and there's this governance code of voluntary organisations, and now more recently the charity regulator has come up with their own code. So we actually have 2 governance codes that we're supposed to be adhering to. As Pat said earlier, that imposes quite a burden on the organisation. We're trying our best to update and improve and develop policies and procedures in all the many, many areas that we're required to have as a functioning organisation, meeting the requirements of the charity regulator and our funders. But it does take a lot of time, and we're still working our way through it. And as Pat mentioned, GDPR, of course, was a whole other dimension that was brought into play last year. Developments on the board: Tony O'Connor, as Pat mentioned earlier, retired as company secretary and board member last year, and Joyce replaced him as company secretary, and Marie Hyland was co-opted to the board to fill the vacancy arising. Meanwhile, the board nominations committee, whose role is to identify, seek out and recommend to the board people who are outside the organisation but who can bring particular skills and experience to the board. And as Pat outlined, we've been very successful and very lucky to have 3 new board members appointed by the board nominations committee, or recommended, I should say, by the board nominations committee, and appointed by the board, subject to your ratification today, and we'll deal with that in a few minutes. As you may also know, 50% of the elected board members are required to stand down every year. This year it was long-standing member Roisin Nolan and Macrina Clancy. Roisin has made it known that she's not standing for re-election after many, many tremendous years' service to the board, so we wish to thank her for all that huge contribution she made and wish her very well in her retirement, but we are actually hanging on to her on the Service Quality and Safety Committee for a little longer. I'm pleased to say Macrina Clancy, however, has agreed to go forward again for election this year, this time in the Dublin region. And also, as Pat mentioned, 2 members were nominated for election to the board at this year's AGM. Robert Alcorn for the South East region and Frank Mitchell for the South region. Thankfully, we do not have a 4-day count to undergo today like the South and the North West, and we needn't worry about which